Highway 1 through Big Sur is open right now. Not safely open, not securely open, desperately open. After nearly 3 years of closure, after 4,600 steel dowels drilled 60 feet into unstable mountainside, after $162 million in repairs, California's most iconic coastal road reopened just 33 days ago. But here's what has engineers in absolute panic. The nightmare they tried to prevent is already beginning. February 10, 2026, 4:22 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Multiple 911 calls flood Monterey County emergency dispatchers. A vehicle has gone off Highway 1 at Hurricane Point Scenic Overlook. The car plummets 500 feet down the cliff face. 500 feet of free fall before slamming into rocks just above the Pacific Ocean. One person is dead. The recovery operation takes 4 hours. Search and rescue teams descend the cliff in 60 to 70 miles per hour wind gusts. Light rain falls as they work. Weather conditions so severe that Sheriff Tina Nieto describes them as extremely challenging. This is not just a tragic accident. This is a warning. Highway 1 has been open for barely 1 month, and nature is already testing the fragile infrastructure. But here's the part that has geologists terrified. The atmospheric river systems that devastated California in late 2025 are returning. Right now, as you hear this, a coastal flood advisory is active across the entire Big Sur coastline. The advisory remains in effect through February 17, 2026. Storm surge up to 1 foot is combining with abnormally high tides. Flooding of low-lying coastal areas is expected. And the highway that just reopened after 1,065 days of closure faces its first real test from winter weather. The question nobody wants to answer is this: can the repairs hold? Or are we watching California's most famous road begin its final collapse into the Pacific Ocean? The statistics are staggering. Highway 1 at Regent Slide closed on February 9, 2024. The landslide originated 450 feet above the roadway. It severed a 6.8-mile segment of Highway 1. Big Sur was cut off from through traffic for almost 3 years. 3 years of economic devastation. 3 years of tourists unable to reach world-famous destinations. 3 years of local businesses hemorrhaging revenue at rates that pushed many to the edge of bankruptcy. Deachen's Big Sur Inn, Nepenthe, Post Ranch Inn, Ventana Big Sur, and the Esalen Institute. Properties that have served visitors for decades watched their customer base vanish overnight. The numbers tell a brutal story. Big Sur tourism generates $1.2 billion annually under normal conditions. That revenue dropped by 35% during the closure. Businesses that depend on 5 million annual visitors suddenly had access from only one direction. Some locations saw visitation plummet by 40%. Treebone's resort owner John Handy describes watching his business collapse. Staff faced impossible decisions: stay in Big Sur with drastically reduced hours and tips, or leave for work elsewhere. Some employees went into debt just to survive. Others borrowed money to keep businesses afloat. Fernwood Resort and Campground General Manager Diana Ballantyne speaks of using the closure time for maintenance projects. But beneath the optimistic spin lies the reality that 2/3 of Highway 1 traffic in a normal year originates from the north. When that access disappears, businesses don't just struggle, they fight for survival. The engineering challenge was unprecedented. Caltrans faced a slope so unstable that workers couldn't approach safely. They deployed remote-controlled heavy equipment. Unmanned bulldozers operated from a distance because the terrain was too dangerous for human presence. 4,600 steel dowels were driven 60 feet deep into the mountainside. These massive shear dowels were designed to prevent total collapse. But the repair site sits surrounded by ancient dormant landslides. Landslides that could activate at any time. Engineers used explosives on the cliffside. They detonated charges to remove unstable rock threatening workers below. Helicopter crews installed protective metal mesh over the slope. Every safety measure available was deployed. And still, geologists describe the location as one of the most challenging slopes in California. The original completion estimate was March 30, 2026. Caltrans finished nearly 90 days early, reopening Highway 1 on January 14th. Governor Newsom announced the early completion as a triumph of engineering and determination. But in the days leading up to the reopening, crews removed 6,000 cubic yards of mud and debris from the Regent slide repair site, enough material to fill 240 dump trucks, all of it deposited by strong winter storms that hit just before the scheduled reopening. The slope was moving before the road even opened. Nature was sending a message that human engineering chose to ignore. Now, the atmospheric river systems are returning. The National Weather Service tracks storm patterns moving toward the California coast. These are not the catastrophic atmospheric rivers of late 2025 that brought flooding across the state. These are smaller systems, Category 1 or Category 2 atmospheric rivers on the intensity scale developed by Scripps Institution of Oceanography. But even these moderate systems bring risks. Scientists at the California-Nevada River Forecast Center monitor precipitation forecasts. Computer models show moisture streaming from the Pacific toward Big Sur's coastline. The region typically sees increased rainfall in February. Landslide danger rises during winter storm sequences, and the newly stabilized slope at Regent Slide has never been tested by sustained precipitation. Dr. Jason Keene, a research hydrologist with the USGS Landslide Hazards Program, describes debris flows as floods on steroids. When soil becomes saturated, when water weight exceeds the capacity of slopes to absorb it, catastrophic movement begins. These flows can move at speeds exceeding 35 miles per hour. They carry boulders, trees, vehicles, entire structures down mountainsides. Stopping them is nearly impossible. The best defense is evacuation. Get out of the way before the mountain comes down. Big Sur's coastline has experienced over 1,500 mapped large landslides throughout its history. The area is one of the most landslide-prone stretches in California. Geologists have documented this for decades. Historical records show that landslide activity increases dramatically during severe El Niño years. The season from 1997 to 1998 closed Highway 1 all along the Big Sur coast. About 40 different sections of the highway were damaged by flooding and mudslides. The 2017 storms brought record damage. In February 2017, the Pfeiffer Canyon Bridge was displaced by an active landslide. The bridge support moved 8 inches in a single night. Engineers deemed it too unstable to use. That section of Highway 1 remained closed for 8 months. The new bridge cost $24 million. Then came the Mud Creek landslide. 6 million cubic yards of earth moved in what engineers called a once-in-a-century event. The 2017 Mud Creek slide was the largest landslide in California history at that time. It took Caltrans 14 months and $54 million to repair. 14 months to move enough earth and rebuild enough roadway to restore access. But that was 2017. The climate has changed since then. Atmospheric rivers are intensifying. Research funded by the Department of Energy shows that climate change could increase total precipitation in future atmospheric rivers by as much as 40%. The atmosphere is reorganizing itself. Warmer air holds more moisture. For every degree Fahrenheit of temperature increase, the atmosphere can hold about 4% more water. Global temperatures have risen approximately 2 degrees Fahrenheit since the late 1800s. That means the atmosphere now carries roughly 8% more water vapor than it did in the pre-industrial era. When moisture-laden atmospheric rivers collide with California's coastal mountains, that water gets squeezed out. It falls as rain or snow at rates that historical infrastructure was never designed to withstand. At hurricane point, emergency crews worked through the evening of February 10th. Big Sur. Fire and the Monterey County Sheriff's Office established unified command. Rescue personnel descended cliff faces with ropes and technical equipment. The vehicle rested more than 500 feet below the roadway, on rocks just above the waterline. One occupant was pronounced dead at the scene. The recovery operation continued until 8:45 p.m. Teams navigated treacherous terrain in deteriorating weather. Wind gusts reached 60 to 70 miles per hour. The National Weather Service issues forecasts, but as first responders note, Hurricane Point has unique microclimates. The location is named Hurricane Point for a reason. Geographic features create wind conditions that can exceed regional averages. The curve in the road combines with extreme elevation to make this one of the most dangerous sections of Highway 1. Vehicles go off the cliff at Hurricane Point approximately 10 times per year. This is the highest cliff on the Big Sur coast. The fatality on February 10th marks the first such incident in recent months. But the timing is ominous. Highway 1 has been fully open for just 27 days when this crash occurs. Weather is deteriorating, storm systems are moving in, and the fragile roadway faces conditions it has not encountered since engineers declared it safe to reopen. The California Highway Patrol investigates the circumstances of the crash. Sheriff Tina Nito extends condolences to the victim's family. One person is transferred to the Monterey County Sheriff's Coroner's Office for identification and notification of next of kin. The tragic details accumulate, but the larger questions remain unanswered. Was weather a factor? Did rain make the roadway slick? Did wind push the vehicle toward the edge? Or is this simply the statistical inevitability of a dangerous road becoming operational again after 3 years of closure? Hurricane Point sits 5 miles north of Big Sur State Historic Park. The scenic overlook attracts visitors who want to photograph the dramatic coastline. But the same beauty that draws tourists creates the hazard. Steep cliffs, sharp curves, narrow shoulders, limited barriers between the road and 500-foot drops to the ocean. This is Highway 1. This has always been Highway 1. The question facing California is whether this iconic road can survive in a climate that no longer matches the conditions under which it was built. The economic implications extend far beyond Big Sur. Highway 1 serves as California's coastal economic lifeline. When the road closes, tourism revenue vanishes, but the impacts ripple outward. Farms that depend on Highway 1 for market access find themselves isolated. Agricultural operations in the Central Coast struggle to ship products. Dairy farms cannot move milk. Organic produce operations watch harvests decompose because transportation networks have failed. The regional food supply chain breaks down, not because farms are destroyed, but because the single road connecting them to markets no longer exists. Small business owners face ruin. Restaurants that have served Big Sur for decades sit empty when through traffic stops. Art galleries holding irreplaceable collections become inaccessible. Hotels representing generational investments face bankruptcy even if their structures survive. Without Highway 1, there is no tourism. Without tourism, there is no economy. The human cost extends beyond those directly affected to encompass an entire community watching its way of life disappear. During the recent 3-year closure, businesses borrowed money just to survive. Employees relied on savings, took reduced hours, cut expenses to the bone. Some left the area entirely, seeking work elsewhere. Those who stayed described the experience as economic warfare. Month after month of watching revenue drop while fixed costs continue to rise. But now the road is open. Governor Newsom celebrated the early reopening as restoring a vital corridor. Transportation Secretary described it as the result of extraordinary teamwork and commitment. Local business owners prepared for revenge tourism. Pent-up demand from 3 years of limited access was expected to bring visitors flooding back. John Handy at Treebones Resort talks about going from surviving to thriving. The narrative was supposed to be triumphant. Highway 1 would reopen. Tourism would return. The Big Sur economy would recover. Except nature had other plans. 27 days after the road opens, a fatal crash occurs during deteriorating weather. Coastal flood advisories activate across the region. Storm systems approach from the Pacific. And the newly stabilized slope that took 4,600 steel dowels and $162 million to secure faces its first real test. Satellite imagery from the National Weather Service shows atmospheric river moisture streaming toward California. The plume of water vapor extends from the tropical Pacific toward the coast. When these systems make landfall, they interact with California's coastal topography. Mountains force the moist air upward. As air rises and cools, water vapor condenses. It falls as precipitation at rates that can overwhelm drainage systems, saturate soils, and trigger landslides. The coastal flood advisory issued for Big Sur extends from Sunday, February 15th through Tuesday, February 17th at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. At the Monterey tidal gauge, high tide is expected to reach 1.5 feet above normal on Monday morning. Storm surge of up to 1 foot combines with astronomical tides to enhance the flooding threat. Low-lying areas near shorelines and tidal waterways face inundation. Parks, lots, and roads may experience flooding with isolated road closures expected. The National Weather Service advises travelers to allow extra time. Some roads may be closed. Do not drive around barricades or through water of unknown depth. These are standard warnings that accompany coastal flood advisories. But in Big Sur, where Highway 1 clings to cliff faces hundreds of feet above the ocean, where landslides can bury the road in minutes, where 500-foot drops to the Pacific create fatal consequences for anyone who loses control, these warnings carry additional weight. This is not just about inconvenient flooding. This is about infrastructure at the absolute limit of its stability facing renewed assault from atmospheric forces. Geotologists monitoring the Regent's slide repair site track soil saturation levels. They analyze slope movement using sensors installed during the reconstruction. Any sign of renewed instability triggers immediate alerts. But the sensors can only detect what is happening. They cannot prevent it. If water saturation exceeds the capacity of 4,600 steel dowels to hold the slope in place, if the weight of precipitation overwhelms the engineered stabilization, the mountain will move again. When that happens, response time is measured in minutes, maybe hours, if conditions are favorable. Highway 1 could close again with almost no warning. Drivers could be trapped between collapse zones. Rescue operations could face the same impossible conditions that emergency crews encountered during the 2024 disasters. Helicopters struggling through 90 miles per hour winds. Zero visibility. Landslides continuing even as evacuations proceed. The nightmare scenario that engineers worked for 3 years to prevent could materialize in a single storm. Climate scientists analyze whether the current atmospheric river intensity matches model predictions. Research shows that climate change is making these systems stronger. Warmer ocean temperatures increase evaporation. More water vapor enters the atmosphere. When atmospheric rivers form, they carry unprecedented volumes of moisture. Studies tracking atmospheric rivers over the Pacific have found water vapor transport rates equal to 7 to 15 times the average daily discharge of the Mississippi River. Imagine 15 Mississippi rivers flowing through the sky. All that water eventually falls somewhere. When it falls on Big Sur, when it saturates slopes that are already unstable, when it exceeds the capacity of drainage systems designed for historical weather patterns, catastrophic failures occur. Dr. Daniel Swain, a climate scientist at UCLA, describes how atmospheric rivers can interact with other storms. The collision intensifies precipitation. Short bursts of extra intense rainfall create flash flooding conditions. This is what emergency managers fear most. Not the steady rain that allows soils to gradually absorb water, but the sudden downpours that exceed absorption rates and trigger immediate runoff. Water racing down mountainsides, gathering debris, accelerating to deadly speeds. Debris flows that can destroy anything in their path. The political calculus is brutal. California has invested $162 million in Highway 1 repairs since January 2023. That figure covers 4 major projects. But the total cost of maintaining Highway 1 through geologically active terrain is far higher. Every closure requires millions in repairs. Every landslide demands new engineering solutions. The Pfeiffer Canyon Bridge replacement cost $24 million. The 2017 Mud Creek repairs cost $54 million. Now the Regent's Slide and Paul's Slide repairs have consumed another $162 million. At what point does the cost become unsustainable? At what point do policymakers look at the expense of repeated rebuilding and ask whether Highway 1 can even exist in this location long-term? Some engineers have proposed a tunnel system through the mountains. Estimated cost exceeds $10 billion. Others suggest accepting that Big Sur will only be accessible by limited routes during certain seasons. The road that connected California's coast might become a seasonal attraction, closed for months each winter. This represents a radical reimagining of infrastructure. Perhaps nature will reclaim what humans temporarily controlled. They spent $162 million to keep this road open for 27 days. Subscribe to see how long it lasts this time. The debate extends to building codes and development restrictions. Should reconstruction be allowed in areas demonstrating such catastrophic instability? Some argue that taxpayers should not fund repeated rebuilding in known hazard zones. Others counter that abandoning Big Sur means surrendering an iconic American landscape to climate change. The philosophical questions are profound. What responsibility does society bear for communities built in dangerous locations? What do we owe to residents whose choices to live in beautiful but vulnerable places now seem tragically unwise? Big Sur residents have lived on this coastline for generations. Some families have owned properties for decades. Their entire lives are built around this landscape. Telling them to abandon their homes, to accept that the place they love is no longer safe, creates impossible moral dilemmas. But continuing to rebuild in areas where landslides occur every few years, where atmospheric rivers of unprecedented intensity strike with increasing frequency, may represent an even more impossible choice. Insurance companies are already making these calculations. Properties in high-risk geological areas may lose coverage. When insurers refuse to provide policies, when the cost of coverage becomes prohibitive, property values collapse. Homes become unsellable. Entire communities face economic death spirals. This is not theoretical. This is happening now in fire-prone areas of California. It will soon extend to landslide-prone coastal regions. The market is pricing in the reality that climate change makes certain locations uninsurable. When that happens, government faces a choice. Step in with public insurance programs, effectively subsidizing risk, or allow communities to fail, accepting that some places can no longer support human habitation. Neither option is politically acceptable. Both options may be inevitable. The 2024 Christmas floods that originally closed Highway 1 at Regent's Slide exceeded all historical precedents. Highway 1 construction began in 1919. It took 18 years to complete through terrain that engineers described as impossible to stabilize permanently. Multiple sections have collapsed and been rebuilt over the decades. But the fundamental question remains: is Highway 1 geologically doomed? Can any amount of engineering overcome the forces that nature applies to unstable coastal slopes during atmospheric river events? Here's the real question. If you lived in Big Sur right now, would you stay or evacuate? Comment below, because that decision might not be hypothetical for much longer. The historical record provides sobering context. The 1983 storms triggered major landslides that closed Highway 1 for months. Damage exceeded $50 million. The 1998 El Niño brought catastrophic failures, requiring $100 million in repairs. The 2017 events were called once-in-a-century occurrences. But once-in-a-century events are now happening every few years. The climate system is reorganizing itself faster than models predicted. Conditions that were supposed to arrive in 2040 or later are occurring in 2026. This acceleration catches emergency planners completely unprepared. Infrastructure designed for historical climate cannot withstand accelerated change. Roads fail, bridges collapse, entire sections of coastline become impassable. And the question facing California is not whether this will happen again. The question is when. Atmospheric river forecasting shows multiple systems approaching the coast through February. Each one carries moisture. Each one threatens precipitation that could exceed the capacity of saturated soils to absorb it. The Regent's Slide repair site sits surrounded by dormant landslides. If water saturation triggers movement in adjacent slopes, if ancient slides activate and begin moving toward the newly repaired section of Highway 1, all the steel dowels and engineering expertise in the world cannot stop it. Satellite monitoring continues 24 hours a day. Ground sensors feed data to Caltrans headquarters. Any anomaly triggers immediate investigation. But monitoring is not prevention. Sensors detect movement after it starts. They cannot predict the exact moment when saturated soil exceeds its shear strength and begins to slide. That moment could come during any storm. It could come weeks from now. Or it could come in the next 48 hours as the current coastal flood advisory brings storm surge and high tides to an already stressed coastline. Emergency managers prepare for worst-case scenarios. Evacuation plans are updated, shelter locations are confirmed. But evacuating Big Sur during an active storm presents nearly impossible challenges. If Highway 1 closes again, if landslides block both directions, residents and tourists could be trapped. Helicopter evacuations would face the same weather conditions that made the February 10th recovery operation so dangerous. Wind gusts up to 70 miles per hour, reduced visibility, unstable terrain. Rescues that take 4 hours per person are not scalable to dozens or hundreds of trapped individuals. Drop your location in the comments and hit that like button. Let's see who's watching from places that climate change is coming for next. The National Weather Service issues its forecasts with professional detachment. Coastal flood advisory. Minor flooding expected. Isolated road closures possible. But beneath the measured language lies the reality that Big Sur's infrastructure exists at the absolute edge of viability. One major storm, one intense atmospheric river, one cascade of landslides, and California's most iconic coastal road could close again. This time, the closure might be permanent. This time, engineers might look at the damage and conclude that no amount of money can make Highway 1 safe in this location. This time, the conversation might shift from when we reopen to whether we reopen. Those questions remain unanswered as storm systems approach from the Pacific. Highway 1 is open today. It was open yesterday. It might be open tomorrow. But the long-term future is written in satellite data showing atmospheric river moisture, in soil saturation measurements exceeding safe thresholds, in the physics of water-loaded slopes pressing against engineered stabilization systems. Nature is testing the repairs. The first test came on February 10th when a vehicle plunged 500 feet at hurricane point. The second test is happening right now as coastal flood advisories warn of storm surge and high tides. More tests are coming. Each storm brings another challenge. Each atmospheric river applies more pressure. Eventually, something will fail. The question is not if, the question is when. And when that failure comes, when the next section of Highway 1 collapses into the Pacific Ocean, California will face the decision it has been avoiding for decades. Rebuild again? Invest another $100 million or $500 million or $10 billion in engineering solutions for a road that may be fundamentally incompatible with the emerging climate? Or accept that some infrastructure cannot be saved? Accept that iconic landscapes can become inaccessible? Accept that the California coast that existed throughout the 20th century will not survive the 21st century? Big Sur residents will fight that conclusion. Tourism operators will resist it. Local businesses will demand reconstruction. But the physics of climate change does not care about human desires. Atmospheric rivers will continue to intensify. Precipitation events will continue to exceed historical norms. Slopes will continue to fail. And at some point, the cost of repeated failure will exceed society's willingness to pay for repeated repairs. That point may be closer than anyone wants to admit. Highway 1 reopened on January 14, 2026, after nearly 3 years of closure. 33 days later, a fatal crash occurred during deteriorating weather. Now, coastal flood advisories warn of storm surge and high tides testing newly stabilized slopes. The nightmare is not over. The nightmare is just beginning. And the beautiful, iconic, impossible Highway 1 may be living on borrowed time.